Good afternoon, Kirby.
Matt, hi.
How are you, sir?
Doing great. How are you?
Excellent. It's Friday.
Yeah, it's Friday, and we have got a half day left here in Minnesota before we have our shelter-in-place orders to follow.
I know, pretty crazy.
Yeah. Hey, were you in Mankato earlier today?
Yep. So we're part of the food, I wouldn't call it like essential team members, but we're still running all our facilities. So we had to get a special letter so we can commute. So I'll be working in Mankato next week, but
Okay.
we're just trying to keep that plant running. So all of our plants are running. So we'll continue on.
So then with you being, and I'm just checking the clock here, with you working in Mankato, are you going to stay in Mankato for a week and not,
Potentially,
not
it
come
all
home?
depends.
Okay.
We can still travel if we'd like, but try to isolate so we're not traveling, so we're not part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution.
Right. You know, I saw a map of the United States that was shared by the, let's see here, Minnesota Department of Health. And the darker shade blue you were, the less travel there was based on cell phone data. And Minnesota was one of the darker blue states. So apparently we're good at following standards.
I like it. That's good.
I think we're going to get started in just a couple of seconds here.
Got it.
All right, well, welcome everybody to our webinar on Leadership Standard Work, Strategies to Build Yours. I'm your host, Kirby Sneen. And before we jump right into it and hear from our guest speaker, Matt Kanz, the Director of Continuous Improvement at Jack Link's Beef Jerky, I want to share just a couple of things. First, I want to say thank you and welcome to all the member companies online. We've got a good turnout here this afternoon. In fact, many of you are taking full advantage of your membership by having multiple people join online. I know you're sharing that camera. And so thank you to Anderson Corporation for joining us, Anderson Dahlin, Cantel Medical, even Caribou Coffee, Electronic Systems, Imperial Plastics, Landscape Structures, Laser Peripherals, National Flooring Equipment, Navy Island, OECS Workplace Safety Experts, ProMen Molded Products, TCR Engineering Components, and Worth Adams for joining us online. The webinar is going to flow relatively straightforward. We have got 40 minutes approximately for our guest speaker, Matt Kanz, to be able to share his presentation. And then we've got another 20 minutes for Q&A. And to make sure that that Q&A is structured, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and open up that chat option now. I'll give you a moment to find that. And then once you find it, as questions come up, you can go ahead and chat me. I am listed under the peer group facilitator option. You can chat those questions to me, and I will sequence those during the Q&A portion. Again, that'll be the last 20 minutes of the hour that we have together. So, Matt, I just want to say thanks for putting this all together. I appreciate your willingness to share your experience. Members love the real world practical stuff. And I know we've done a couple of these before and we got one more lined up. So, and thank you, especially considering it sounds like the file, I don't know if it got accidentally deleted or what. So I know you recreated everything today. But when you're a pro like you, I know that that stuff is just on top of mine. So it's just a matter of doing the visuals and typing it up. So I know that was extra work, but I also know because you are ingrained so deeply and care so much about your team and continuous improvement, it was also probably easier for you to recreate than it would be for others that don't have your experience. So thank you, Matt.
That's my faux pas. So again, it's one of those things where standard work, I really do love the subject. And so I'm sure that'll come through today talking about it, but it's a subject that not a lot of people enjoy. So one thing I do ask is a lot of questions. As I'm going through this, please write them down. I'd love to answer questions because I think this is a subject that's pretty near and dear to everybody's heart.
Yeah, and so we did do a pre-event survey, and we did get a few questions. So I'll make sure that we cover those. And I'm sure more questions will come up. I'm sure I'll have a few questions. So everybody, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Matt. Matt, we are all yours for the next 45 minutes here, next 40 minutes, excuse me. I'll watch the clock, and so take it away.
All right, I'm going to pull my screen up here, and I will ask when you guys can see it here. I need to move that out of the way. And let me know when it's in presentation mode.
Looks good.
All right. Hey, welcome everybody. One thing I'd like to say is thank you for being flexible with your schedule. I know it's 4:30 on a Friday. We have a shelter in place order. Some of you may be home. Some of you may not be. I'm not home. I'm at work. As you can see in the background, this is not my living room with my Jack Link stuff everywhere on the wall. But I do love our products. Great company. But today I want to talk about standard work. And specifically, I want to talk about leader standard work. And so some of you may be very enthralled with doing combination charts and doing standard work for team members on the floor. Most of this is going to focus on leader standard work because really that's one of the most essential pieces of continuous improvement and lean. And one thing that's on the screen is leadership continuity. So continuity is kind of a big word, but it's one of those things where when I think about standard work, I think about that. So I've been fortunate in my career to be part of a groundbreaking greenfield. So from the groundbreaking ceremony with the governor all the way through startup of a facility, we've been through 2 brownfields where basically we moved different products in and out of the plant, bought the facility, moved the product lines in there. Been through 3 major moves. The major moves were global, some of them, where we would move a facility from overseas to the U.S. We actually did a reshoring project. And we've also done in the U.S. domestically moving plants. So maybe shuttering a facility or just moving the product lines into a different facility. And I've also ran 4 states as the P&L, responsibility for the P&L as a site leader. And through all of those, I've used leader standard work. It was 11 years ago that it was introduced to me. I laugh, I've been married 19 years. I remember that day, and I remember 11 years ago when I was introduced to leader standard work, and specifically the format that we're going to cover. The reason why it's so near and dear to my heart is when we talk about a greenfield, up 2 brownfields, three plant consolidations, and running 4 sites. The thing that got me through all those was leader standard work, and it was really about continuity of leadership. It's as Kirby mentioned, it's kind of in my blood and my DNA. And I think when you guys see the presentation day and the format and the process that I go through, it may become part of your DNA because it's a really, really good process. So what is leader standard work? I'm a big believer when I put a presentation together, it's not just about my opinion, it's what's out online. So I typed in leader standard work into the search line, and this is what came up, and I want to read it verbatim. It's a set of behaviors and reoccurring activities that advances a lean thinking culture. The practice also creates teachable moments, surfaces immediate opportunities to improve processes. And through it, the work culture learns together what is working and what isn't. That was one of the best lines that I could find about leader standard work. And the reason why I think it is because when people think of the proverbial leader standard work, a lot of those things jump out: activities, lean, processes. But one thing that I kind of did right away when I saw leader standard work, this is what jumped out to me. Leader standard work is a set of commitments and reoccurring actions that advance culture. I took lean out of there. The execution creates teachable moments, so I replaced word with execution, and it surfaces immediate opportunities, just opportunities. And through it, the work culture learns together. The reason why I pulled out some of those things is because when we talk about behaviors, a behavior is different than a commitment. Behaviors come and go, they can change, be modified. Commitments are a commitment. When I talk about activities, if you look up the word activity versus action, action is really goes back to that commitment. It's committing to something, and there's an aim. I like the word aim because It's a target. You're going after it. I took out lean thinking, and there's somebody in the audience that's probably saying, well, wait a minute, from a lean practitioner standpoint, standard work is lean. And with standard work, what happens is it becomes connected together. So some organizations are not anti-lean, but they think of lean as, well, you're bringing in these tools. I take that out and just say standard work is just the way we run the business. So when I talk about standard work to a new organization or a new team, it's not about the lean portion of it. I kind of disassociate that on purpose so people don't associate lean and standard work. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Execution. Practice is great. Execution is even better. When you're in operations or you're talking about execution, that's a key word. Improve processes. Processes and people go hand in hand, but ultimately sometimes leadership standard work is about improving team members. It's not about the process. It's about the team member. And once you make it about the team member, they're the ones that improve the process. So I take that out. And then culture, really what's working and what's not working, it starts with the baseline culture. So again, not anything to take away from that what's out there on the internet, but there's some specific key words, and you notice these are words that are they're committed, it's execution. That's what's key about leader standard work. So format. When you search up, again, go to the internet, many companies, consultancies, everybody has a different format, but consistency really matters. So one of the first comebacks I get from people when I roll out leader standard work is, well, I already have a format. I'm a big believer in it. Completely understand, Matt. I have a format. I always go back to, we need a consistent format. So I'm a pretty big stickler on that, and we'll get into the format because it interlocks the team members together. The team matters. So one thing I've seen from a failure standpoint is that each team member has their different standard work. Well, that kind of defeats the standard work of interlocking. And what I mean by interlocking is if I'm out and Kirby needs to fill in for me and his standard work looks similar to mine, it's a plug and play. He knows where to look for the high level tasks, the hourly tasks, the meetings. It's one and the same. So we don't use different formats. And strategic. So when we talk about leader standard work, if you look at some of these examples off to the side, there's the check the box. So how many times have we heard a meeting, hey, we can't just check the box, and then we give someone a piece of paper to check the box? It goes back to when I think of leader standard work, it's strategic. And the reason why I say strategic is everybody needs to know where they fit and why they matter. And so as you see, when I go through the format, we'll discuss how it's strategic and how it ties to the leader standard work. So again, it's not a check the box. It's not a format that we take and then we make it our own. We'll get into the details of making our own, but the format is really, really critical. And you'll see the word format over and over in the slides, and it's on purpose. The format. So this is a Trifold standard work. So 11 years ago, this is what was introduced to me. Probably it was life-changing to me because it made a lot of the transitions that I went through successful. There's different variations out there of this, and this variation has been modified. This is what I've done over the last several years to modify it. It's based. This is the front page of it. It's broke down into 6 distinct sections. One thing you'll notice, there's some data on there. There's some math in the background. And there's a lot of facts. Hey, what do we need to focus on? What are the things that we're looking at? What are the inspections that we have to do? But one thing, it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually. I took some of the goals off there because didn't want the goals on there, but it's strategic. So when I talk about strategic, we not always use leader standard work and the word strategic because we think day to day. But in reality, on leader standard work, I like to have the weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual tasks on there that tie to the overall objectives of the business. So those are the 6 pieces. There's a back page that we'll get to at the end, but I'm going to jump right into the front side. So when we talk about strategic, it's rarely top of mind. People think, well, leader standard work, we're going to talk about what are the tasks we need to do hour by hour. This is how it works together. This is what you have to get done. Go, 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 go. One thing I like to look at is from a staff level, from a units budget, from a PSYOP, how are we all interacting and linking together at a higher level? So now I know where I need to spend my time. Where do I fit? So whether I'm running a project or building a new facility, the goals of that project would be listed here. What are the weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually tasks or goals? So I know where I fit, and then why do I matter? The reason why that's important is you'll get into your day, something will come up, and you'll need to jump. You'll need to go do something else. This is supposed to rehome you and say, hey, is this something that impacts PSYOP? Is this something that impacts the annual goals? If it doesn't, that's where I pause. So Kirby asked me a question one day. He said, hey, how do you make decisions that need to be really, really quick? And I said, well, first you need to pause. Can you delegate it? Is there someone else that should make that decision? And say, wait a minute, do we need to stop here and look at our overarching goals, and let's focus on those. So I always start with the strategic part, because that's not what people think about when they think of leader standard work. Preset meetings. So being a site leader or being a director of operations, there may be a corporate function that's outside that you have to report to. It could be at a corporate location, or it could just be a remote leadership that's outside the plant. But it's about honoring commitments. So in the upper right-hand corner of this trifold, these are the things that are commitments. So like you see quality meeting there at 2 p.m. It's a corporate quality meeting that we need to attend. The reason why I say that is the meetings that are in this upper right-hand corner are must-make meetings. So when we look at our schedule every day, when we open this up and look at it, we're not skipping these meetings. These are commitments to team members on the floor or outside the operation. Go back to the definition of leader standard work. It's a commitment. These are hard stops. If I need to go to MDI at 9:30, I'm going to be at MDI at 9:30. That's a hard stop. It's a commitment. Execute actions. So if there's a one-on-one on there, don't be late to a one-on-one. Don't skip the one-on-one. If it's 11 a.m. and you see that coming, that's a commitment. And I would argue that if there's something that's not a commitment anymore, or maybe not important, let's say the ISO 9000 that you see on your screen right now, that's a once a year thing. It's not a daily thing. Well, maybe we need to take that off here. But this preset meeting without drop-ins, this is a commitment. And this is a chance to mitigate external issues. And the reason why I say that is when you hit these commitments, this is kind of an agreement between your leadership team, your boss, or corporate. Hey, I'm going to make these things happen. If you need to get a hold of me, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be at this meeting. These are tight properties. So these don't change unless it's not a format change, excuse me, but a change of leader standard work. So I want to stop there just for a second. People ask me all the time, how often should I update my leader standard work? Generally, what I would do is once a period or once a month, so 30 days. The reason why I say that is in this dynamic business, any business, things change fairly quickly. So what I would do is at the beginning of the month, I would go in, update standard work. Maybe some of these meetings would fall off. Maybe some meetings would be added. And as everybody knows, probably on the call, meetings get added. Update it, and then print it off on the hard copy and put it on my desk. I would print off 25 copies. So basically what that is, if we ran just about every day the next 30 days, I would have a new copy of the leader standard work. But generally, the only thing I would update are these hard meetings. The reason why is these are commitments externally to the organization or external to the site. So again, it's about honoring commitments. So the format again, recognize as drop-in. Every day meetings are going to drop in. It's just a natural way of running operations or any business. So we transition to the left side. This is handwritten. So what I would do is when I would come in the morning, as I do now, as soon as I sit down, I'll write through, hey, what do I have going on today that I need to write in? So it may be some type of meeting that I wasn't ready for. It could be a one-on-one that's a rarity. It could be the president of the company wants to have a 30-minute conversation about something. I'm going to write these in. You do see some pre-printed ones in here. So one thing, when I put open time for Gemba, open time for a Gemba walk, that's my commitment. When I talk about engagement, anybody that was at a previous session or has heard me talk about engagement, I block time off for team members. And what that is, it's kind of fluff time. And what I mean by that is I don't need to be in a hurry to get somewhere. I just need to make that time. So that's my commitment to my team, that I'm going to be there for them. Again, it's that commitment to an engagement. The other open spots there, that's really open time where I can make a commitment to somebody, not that's a hard commitment to the right on the daily calendar. This is something where someone walks into the office and says, hey, Matt, I need 15 minutes of your time. I can look at this calendar and write it in and commit the time for the person. So again, format. Delegate meetings. So on purpose, you can see to the left is the drop-in meetings and to the right is the hard meetings. In between, we actually have a little square box. What that box for is really kind of the in-between. Hey, am I double booked? Did I overcommit myself? And what's in between is I start to say, hey, do I need to delegate this meeting to somebody else? Do I need to contact somebody? So let's say, an MDI meeting or something else was overbooked. I need to go to the monthly MDI meeting and the daily one. Now I'm overbooked. So now I'm going to say, hey, in the middle, I'm going to write in there, I need to send Jim to the MDI meeting. They need to go for me. So the beautiful thing about this, it's 7 a.m, arrive to work. I know a 9:30 meeting, 2.5 hours before, I'm contacting Jim on the phone, text messaging him and saying, hey, I need you to cover for me on this MDI meeting. I'm double booked. When you go, will you please deliver this message or this message? That's the reason why that box and that middle portion is there, is that's the go-between between drop-in and commitments. The other thing is the pregame, postgame. So it's one to say I call it a pregame. So if I know I have a meeting, I'm kind of mentally preparing myself throughout the day on the drop-ins and on the standard meetings. What do I need to get prepared? And it's always funny how there's something that'll catch me and say, hey, I'm not ready for this 4:30 meeting with second shift. I need to prepare for it. So that's the pregame, postgame. I'll make notes in there to say, hey, I need to contact finance and get a certain number from them, whatever it may be, by 4:30. There again, send a text message to the finance guy. He can help me get ready. One key component is giving opportunities to lead. The reason why that's important is I had a leader give me their calendar the other day. They actually shoved it over to me on the desk because they said they were really busy. I said, okay, can I see your calendar? Let's go through it. And they had 12 or 13 meetings on their calendar. And I was like, wow, this is really busy. And I pointed to one of them and I said, hey, isn't your assistant here today? And he said, yeah. I said, well, that's a perfect meeting for them to go to. No. I need to get some stuff ready for that. And this was like an hour before the meeting. So they didn't prepare. They could have prepared and they could have delegated it. One thing we talk about delegation as potentially, deflecting work. I don't want to delegate because I feel like I'm giving somebody more work. When you're a leader, you need to empower your team members. You need to give them work. They want to help you. And so this is a perfect example where when you're looking at the meetings for the day right away in the morning, what can you delegate and give opportunities to lead? I would challenge everybody that's on this meeting today, really look in the mirror and say, do I delegate enough? If you're being honest, a majority of us would say no. And I'm in that same camp. There's things that I don't delegate because I kind of want to do this, or I really enjoy doing this. Generally, that's what I hear is, and the leader that I was talking to likes to firefight a little bit. So not delegating that's kind of giving up something they enjoy. But again, look at the delegation piece. And then notes to tie doodle to. It's one of those things where I like to doodle, sitting in a meeting, thinking about something. That note section was really kind of a way just to write out notes and thoughts. By the end of the day, that would be pretty much full on a normal day because that's what we use. That's a great place to put notes. Format. So 11 years on leader standard work, and about 18 months ago, I had the aha moment. And the aha moment for me was what's highlighted in that middle right-hand side. Haven't seen this on anybody's leader standard work before, but this was game changing for me as a leader because it started using data for decisions. So when you look at percent loaded, you see 50, 60, 60, 65, 55. Basically what that is it took all the totals of the hours that were dedicated to hard meetings. And what I mean by that, let's go back to what I talked about. Those are hard commitments, either to a team member to be on the floor for an MDI, a corporate team member that you're supposed to report out to, or some other ISO meeting or whatever it may be. Those are core commitments. So if everything went wrong today, those are probably the things that you need to do. And look, I'm 50% loaded. So I just want to use that column just for an example. The reason why I say that is I hear a lot of team members say, I'm busy. You don't know the half of it, Matt. I'm busy all the time. This ended that conversation because what happened was my team had filled this out and it showed just how much free time they actually had. I had team members that was 20, 30% loaded. And when they did this exercise, and we'll get into the process on how this works, basically what they came to find out was, hey, we can add some things. We can do some more things. So when we look, just hang on one second, guys. Sorry, we had a pop-up box come up. All right. Execution without empathy, or execution with empathy, not emotion. So I go back to when we fill this out, or I have a team member fill it out and they see that they're 20% loaded, it's a little bit of a shot to their ego because they feel like, hey, I'm so busy. But really, when we talk about boil the commitments down to what actually needs to be done, 20% of my time is actually worthwhile or committed to get execution done. The last thing is the 5 hours, 6 hours. I wanted to know how much time we're dedicated to being on the floor and interacting with the team. So we track the total number of hours with the percentage, but the percentage is a way to say, hey, let's face what's going on so we can fix it. So some days I had one leader that was 85% booked with meetings. And some of you may do your leader standard work. You say, yep, the reality is 85% of my day on Thursday is booked. And that's a real day that this leader that worked for me in the past had 85%. So the strategy that we came up with was nothing can be booked on that day anymore. You've got to work to delegate 1 or 2 meetings, and you're not allowed to add any more to that Thursday. And what happened is we started making decisions with data. So if you know your Thursday is 85% overloaded on Monday, what can you do? You can start on Monday to delegate stuff on Thursday to other team members on the floor. And some of you may say, hey, I'm an individual contributor. I want leader standard work, but I don't have any direct reports. You can still delegate things. And what I mean by that, I go back all the way to when I first started in manufacturing. I was a lead. I had 8 team members, starting off in manufacturing. Those hourly team members, I could delegate to them. I could ask them to do tasks for me because they wanted to. We have to remember the teams that work for me or work for you or me, they want to help. That's why they're there. But with the leadership standard work and doing the percentage, what's loaded, now you're making decisions with data. So you can say, hey, I want to help you get from 85% down to 60% so it's more manageable. How can we do that? Let's look at the meetings. Let's use data to drive decisions. So conference calls from anywhere. So I call it the anyway rule. Oh, anyway, I'm in my office and I have another call at 5:30. Anyway, I'm in my office. I might as well just stay here. Well, I did away with the anyway rule. I took all the conference calls that had a call-in number with the conference code, and I put it on my leadership standard work. The reason why I did that is I could take the call from anywhere. So I've mentioned before in past posts, I can take calls from a supervisor's office on the shop floor. I can take it on the main shop floor if cell phones are allowed. I'm interacting with team members. I can take it from the lunchroom with all the team members around. It's not about being in the office. So the anyway rule, well, anyway, I've got a call in 15 minutes. I might as well sit in my office, done. Or might as well rule, well, might as well, I need to take it from my office or take it from the conference room. Hey, let's go take it to the floor. We have the call-in number. We have the information. Let's do that. And I've even done it with a WebEx. So just like a computer screen with a camera, take the call from the lunchroom with the team members. They can see what you're working on. It becomes interactive. Well, that was a waste rule. My favorite rule. So how many times have you got on a conference call, you waited in your office or you waited in your cubicle an extra 20 minutes. It was 5:10, the meeting's at 5:30, and you use the anyway rule. I might as well stay at my computer. You get on the call and no one's on the call. And like, well, that was a waste of time. No one showed up. Well, that's part of it. Don't let the conference call dictate the day. Go continue, be on the floor, interact with the team. So if no one shows up to the call, guess what? You're out. Nothing. You hang up the phone and you go back to the floor and you start to interact with the team. That's why it's important on the call-in notes to put all the information on there so you're not chained to your computer or your desk or your office and not interacting with the team on the floor. Two sides to every story. So here are the details. So when you flip over the leader standard work, so on the front side, all those panels that we just went through, this is the back side. So what you see back here is the top story, assignments, top story, continued. These were all the inputs from the day. So anything from recognition, and a top story is really a just do it. What I mean by that is a team member did something that was a top story. They did something that was really great. I would write that down. And the reason why I put that as the heading is we need to be positive. We have enough challenges in our day-to-day to be negative. We need to find ways to be positive. So when I went out there, I made sure my goal from being on the shop floor, what is the top story? What are the things that I can recognize? Drawing. So if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, the sketches, many times I've been on the floor and someone's like, hey, do you have a pen? Do you have a paper? Always do. We have leader standard work. So they could do a quick sketch. Hey, I'm thinking about relaying out the cell. What do you think about this? You write that out. Now you have it. Hand it over. Give me back my leader standard work. Now I've got the sketch that maybe a team member from the floor drew on a cell or a different design for a layout. But it's on here. And then the notes and ideas and just the jot down notes. It's just a way to remember things. So anytime, hey, normal day, nothing really happened, except I had a great idea for overpack on a certain product in one of the sites that I'm at in northern Wisconsin. Hey, here's my memory idea. So I can write that down really quick. It just jolts my memory. But I really want to focus in on the top story or recognition. Make sure part of your leader standard work is recognition. So when you're going out onto the floor and you recognize team members, let them know, hey, part of my leader standard work is recognition. Hey, look, here it is. Here's where I wrote it down. Great job. We appreciate what you do. So I want to pause just for a second. A lot of team members, a lot of people ask me about, hey, can I have the tool? Give me the tool. So I'll talk about this for 5 minutes to somebody. They're like, hey, send me the tool. I want the Excel sheet. This is great. I want to do this. What happens is everything behind that doesn't work. And the reason why I say that is because there's a process to build this, and it's very methodical. I'm going to walk through each step of the process, and by the end of it, you're going to be like, Matt, that was overload. But there's a reason why. The reason why is over 11 years, I've failed at every which way to do this. And anybody that's tried leader standard work and really, really tried has failed at this multiple times. It's okay. That's part of it. But the success of the format is based on the success of the process. And so we're going to go through the process step by step. And I want to ask questions at the end, or have you ask questions at the end. But the process, standard work process, is a mirror. So there's a picture of me when I was a little bit younger. And I'm looking in it's a photo, but I tried to make it look like a mirror. Don't want to look at the mirror right now without getting a haircut and everything else. But at the end of the day, it's a reflection of me. It's insight into discipline on you. So all of the process, all of the format starts with me. It's not anybody else. So I see a lot of times people try to give or push standard work onto other people. The first thing I do with any new leadership team is I do my standard work first. If I can't do it, why would I expect them to do it? The other piece of that is if I'm on standard work and I'm not following it, that's a reflection on me. Your team is not going to be able to follow it. And when I talk about stand in the circle, I want to share a quick story. It's the 80-20 rule. Data is not a security blanket. One thing that I look at is people want to collect a lot of data. They want to say, hey, I want you to write down everything you're working on for the next 2 months, and then we're going to come together and we're going to do your standard work. Here's the story. So we have a process in one of our plants that is really critical to the facility. And I went and stood there for 5 minutes, kind of give or take maybe 10 or 15 seconds. And I watched the process run, and it was down about 60% of the time. It's 5 minutes I spent there. Plant's been running for 45 years, and I was there 5 minutes. So when you look at the data, 5 minutes out of 45 years, and I went to a meeting, and we were talking with the team there, and I said, hey, that process is really not dependable. And they're like, hey, what do you mean? I said, it's down about 60% of the time. And they're like, no, oh, Matt, that's an insult. I can't believe you said that. They said, but we collected all the data, for the last year. Let's pull it up. And we pulled it up, and it was 64% of the time it was down. And the entire room went silent. And I said, guys, let me stop you for a second. I'm not smart. Don't think that I'm like clairvoyant or I know something. I said, it's the 80-20 rule, guys. When you go to the floor, taking a snapshot, the more data you collect doesn't help you. The more data you collect is not going to make you feel better at night. A snapshot of data is really critical. Any length of snapshot will tell the story. And the reason why I talk about that is one of the reasons why this process fails is because there isn't a process to build it. It's a hammer. So it's a tool that drives nails, not results. Everybody wants to say, here's the form, go fill it out. Now you're on leader standard work. Hey, next time the lean guy comes, make sure you tell him you're on leader standard work and make sure you have it with you. That fails every time. Everybody thinks they can plug it in and it's just going to work. Or they create a checklist. Hey, yeah, Matt, he gave a pretty good presentation. Yeah, so. But I got a checklist now. Here's all the check the boxes that we're going to do to follow leader standard work. Hey, make sure you tell the plant manager you're on standard work now. Or people take an opportunity to prove they're busy. I had one team member, I gave him the format. We were going through the process, and basically they filled it 100%, and every day was 100%. And I was like, okay, that's not really the intention of this. I respect you a lot. You don't need to show me that you're busy all the time. And then the worst one, honestly, is the informal performance improvement plan. And regretfully, I've heard people do this. Well, he's a performance issue or she's a performance issue. We're going to put them on leader stand work, and they're going to do what I tell them. Every one of those, I failed at every one of those. And that's why this process is so critical. Step one of the process. So we're going to go through each step here. Step one is to meet one-on-one. Leader standard work is not a group activity. The reason why is it's very personal. What people do each day at their job is very personal to them. But when you meet with that person, you talk about the goals and the strategy of the business. Start at the highest level. They need to know where they fit and why they matter to the organization. It's critical that you level set on that. Number two is ask them how they plan their day and focus on the feedback. The reason why you ask them is we make a lot of assumptions and we're very judgmental. That's just the way people are. They like to judge because it's quicker. They make assumptions, but ultimately somebody may be on standard work. Somebody may be planning their day and we just don't know that. Step three, visually talk to them about the alignment of goals and the day-to-day, if there is any. And when I talk about visually, you see a whiteboard behind me. We're going to get to the whiteboard here in a little bit, but I'm a big visual person about how people fit and where they matter or where they fit and why they matter to the business. Back to their feedback, I want to know, is there a connection between the goals of the business and how they plan their day and what they're focusing on? It's critical that they see that, because if there's a disconnect, I want that to be a little bit of an aha moment for them. Okay, maybe I'm not focusing on the right things. Step four is to talk about journaling. So back to the data piece that I talked about the machine downtime, where everybody thought I was crazy that it was 60% and it was 64%. 3 days. It's only 3 days of journaling. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I've always used Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, unless I put a caveat in here. we have weekend crews. So we'll run a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But the key thing is, it's not the first day they come in or the last day. Try to keep it in the middle, because as we all know in operations or anything that we do, the first day and the last day can be completely different. It's the middle of the week or the middle of their week, whatever that may be, that we want them to journal. Step 5, it's handwritten. So every 15 minutes, they're writing down what they're working on. And I put 1 to 10 words because I don't want a book. Again, all of this is out of mistakes. People have written me a paragraph every 15 minutes. Nah, can't do that. Some people have written down email. Perfect. Hey, it's 1 word. It's email. They're doing email. No problem. 2 things, though, that people miss. I'm already teaching them to do handwritten notes with a piece of paper, and I'm checking their accountability. So when we talk about leaders stay at work, it is pencil and it is paper. It's not the iPad. It's not electronics, not anything like that. I really want them to put pencil to paper. And I work in food plants. We use pens, but we still do use paper. So pen to paper. But what I'm understanding with them is that their muscle memory is already being created, or the lack of muscle memory is already being seen. So step 6, this is the unseen part. Agree on a week to kick it off and understand when they're going to kick it off. I want to go back 1 second. The reason why I say kick it off, let's say I'm a new team member. I'm going to do journaling next week. I commit to my leader next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I'm going to journal every 15 minutes. As a leader, I'm going to send them a calendar reminder and say, starting 6 a.m. on Tuesday, I'm going to start journaling. And we're going to set a midway point. The midway point is Wednesday at lunchtime. Meet with that person and make sure that they don't have any gaps in their journaling. The reason why is many times I've asked people to journal and we just expect things to happen the way we expect them to, and they don't. It's the first coaching session. The reason why I say that is if we don't have the calendar invite, that's one problem. But also it's understanding, are they following the process? That's a flag to me. As a new leader coming into an organization, I do this right away with my team. Literally the first 2 weeks, we're journaling. And the reason why is it's a pretty good indicator. If you don't follow simple directions as far as filling things out that quickly, I'm not discounting anybody, but I'm gonna have that conversation right away about expectations and what we need to do. But we're gonna meet and kind of review the process. And again, 80% of the time, get good results. People are filling it out and then they go along. Step 8, when it's completed, it's a good coaching moment. So how do they feel? And every time it's wow, that was a lot of work. Or, I started to write things down. I started to see patterns. It's kind of weird. I didn't think I spent that much time doing that. Remember the first conversation we had, how they plan their day? This is kind of their self-actualization to say, how are they really spending their day? Again, it's another good coaching moment to say, hey, how do you feel after this exercise? Step 9 is Excel. So I'm a big math, facts, and data guy. I want data, I want math, and I want facts built into Busy. So we're going to take the categories, and I'm going to use this drawing up here. So coronavirus time, we have actually going to try this here. So what we want to look at is we want to understand, not that marker, obviously. Real quick, we want to understand what are the categories, their top 3. Here's the minutes. And this is the categories. So what we're looking for is understanding from a chart perspective. And what it is in Excel, you're putting what they did and the number of minutes they spent on it. And what you're going to see is you're going to put it into a graph and you're going to get a Pareto. So you start to define where their time is being spent. The nice thing about that is when you do that step, it becomes data. It doesn't become, I'm really busy. It becomes math, facts, and data. So it defines where the time spent. Step 11 is meet with the team member. The key thing is, again, we did this with just one team member. We're not doing a group. But as a leader, you need to look at the data first because it can be jaw-dropping what happens. I'll share a story. We had a lead that was really, really good. So this leader standard work goes all the way down to leads on the shop floor. Found out 21% of his time was moving material. And it was an aha moment for him. He didn't even realize he was moving material that much. The reason why that's important is before I shared the data with him is I went to the materials manager and talked to him about what is going on. And it was actually a gap in the process. So when we met with the team member, we were able to tell Jason, hey, we can pull this off you now. We found out that 21% of your time was spent moving material. We never knew that. It was an aha moment for him. He didn't realize it. And it was an aha moment that we're making the business better because of the Pareto chart showed that he was moving material rather than doing lead jobs and supporting the team on the floor. So again, now it's time to pull the format out. Again, I go back to what I talked about before. Everybody wants the tool to go use the tool to hit the hammer and the nail and just get it done. Now the format comes out. This is the critical point is generally I choose 3 areas. And what I do is the whatever they spent the 3 most time blocks in, that goes into their leader standard work. So I'm going to go back just for a second here. Back to this main piece here, right here on the right-hand side. So obviously this is an older version of standard work for me. This would not be the lead or supervisor or the manager, but we would allocate those 3 things, the amount of time that they spent. The reason why that's important is we try to use leader standard work as a way to change behaviors. Remember, I crossed out the word behavior and I put commitment. So I had one team member that said, hey, I spend a majority of my time fixing other people's problems. He's a lead. Great. It was like 60% of his time troubleshooting. So you know what we did? We dedicated 60% of his night to troubleshooting, but he made the commitment to hold it to 60%. And you say, well, why don't you want, to help everybody? No, because what we found was he was overcommitting himself and doing the work for the team members. So what we did was we allowed him to do 60% because that's a fact of life. You have to do that. That's just the way it is. We're not trying to alter behaviors yet. We're pretty much stating the current state right now, but we're making a commitment that they're not going to go over that amount. So what it comes down to is we pick the top 3 and we put that in the commitments. One more. The reason why I say one more is this is where we start to bend the trend and start to change what's going on is we align priorities. So generally, almost a majority of the time, where people spend their time and where the organization needs them to spend their time doesn't align really well. So instead of saying, we're going to change your day and you're going to follow this checklist, what we say, what I've done is, hey, we're going to continue to do the 3 things, but we're going to bend the trend and we're going to start working this way. So we're going to take one task, one duty, one thing, and we're going to make a commitment that you're going to spend 30 minutes a night on MDI. That's a common one. One thing, managing daily improvement, filling out the boards, 30 minutes. When do you want to do it? That's another thing. When you look at the data and you put it in Excel, you can start to see patterns of where they spend their time in the plant, what they do. So you can kind of curtail the standard work to the business, but to also what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So why is this so successful? And this has been successful for me personally, but also professionally with my team, is because the inputs are created by the team members. Too many times we create standard work, and I made this mistake. Here's what I think is important. Here's all the things you're going to do. That just goes out the window. The foundation is built on a partnership. We built the standard work as a team. So whoever it is, whether it's a supervisor, manager, we go through this 12-step process together. Remember I mentioned you do your leader standard work. We interlock. So when you're having that conversation through the 12 steps, you're sharing your experience on what you learn, and then you're aligning, hey, when do you want to meet on your leader standard work? Is it 4 p.m., 3 p.m.? Remember those fluff time or that buffer time? Guess what gets plugged in there? That's my chance not to audit their leader standard work, but to meet with them on their leader standard work. acknowledge the current state. Too many times I see with leader standard work, we don't acknowledge what's happening right now. We try to force and shove like all these objectives and tasks into someone's day. And when they don't hit it, we're surprised. That's not acknowledging the current state. Those 3 things that are up there on the board, whatever they may be, that's real. That you can't ignore that. If they're spending their time there, we can figure out how to fix that later, but we have to acknowledge it. You can't fix it if you don't face it. Math, facts, and data, not emotion. That percent per day was game changing for me, because now it's not about how valuable you are, how busy you are. It's about how percent loaded are you. Let's have a data-driven discussion about percent load, not you're just busy. And where you fit and why you matter. Leader standard work is a great coaching moment at multiple steps along the way to help people see where they fit and why they matter. It's critical. That's why I always start with strategic. Step 1 of the 12 is about strategic. It's not about, hey, how am I going to create a checklist for you? It's about, hey, here's where the organization is, here's where we want to go and how you fit into it. Now let's get into the details. So format, process, and the interlock. I don't call it auditing standard work. I don't call it auditing leader standard work. It's interlocking. And the reason why I say is it's locking the team together with the strategic goals, your real life, what's actually happening on the plant floor, your standard work. So now it's a team. It's your leader standard work as a group, and then it's combining it as a team. So when you combine it, now you create a support function, a commitment, not activities. So one quick thing, I just want to talk about shelter in place. You know, one thing, like I did here, the visual, I was in a meeting the other day, a camera and walking through visuals, walking through math. We say, well, Matt, how do you do leader standard work when you're at home? The beautiful part about it is Skype and Marco, I think it's Marco Polo. My wife uses it all the time, but you can actually record a message. It's your face or the area that you're in. That interaction, instead of doing the floor walk, you can do a check-in. Hey, I'm going to Marco you at 2 p.m. Pull up on the phone, let's talk. Or Skype, camera, walk through, and then point of contact. If you can't contact somebody visually, send them an email. So if you see Jerry or Jim every day at 2 o'clock, but it's a shelter in place, email them, text message them, phone. You can honor your standard work, but do it electronically or virtually. It's okay to do that. I think the cameras and what we do now are really a nice way to stay in contact face-to-face. And again, whenever I run into issues with standard work, manufacturing time to spend the most precious resources. When I think about, hey, I can't follow standard work, my day's too crazy, I always think about my girls. Honestly, leader standard work's a commitment. If I can't get out of work on time, that's not anybody else's fault. That's my fault. I need to be a better leader of myself to make sure that my commitments are taken care of on time so I can spend time with them. Anytime I kind of want to slide off the path or, not follow what I need to do, I always snap back and say, I need to be a better leader. I need to leave on time today so I can be home. If I'm not doing that, I'm not following standard work. If I'm not following standard work, I'm not honoring the precious resources that I have at home or the precious resource of time. All right, Mr. Kirby. How are you, sir?
Doing great, man. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate the time you put into the presentation and sharing all the real life experience. We got a few questions here that I'll launch into, and then just a couple of quick statements to be able to give those of you that have questions time to write it down and chat it to me. Obviously, we know why you're doing all this. I mean, with that last point there, manufacturing time is critical and important to be able to be as effective as you can with yourself, starting standard work with yourself, to be a good example for your team, but then also to be able to coach others to higher levels of performance so that you can keep manufacturing time and spend the rest of your time with your family. So that motivation is loud and clear. Just another acknowledgement then too, the fact that you recognize that when you were introduced to leader standard work 11 years ago, you put that right up to when you got married 19 years ago. I think that is definitely recognized by the manufacturing community as something that is amazing to see. And so you're obviously a continuous improvement zealot, I think is maybe the best word for it. Here's another one that is just a point of acknowledgement that stood out to me. The fact that you're absolutely right. Behaviors coming and going, and that is something that so many members have worked on. How do we change behavior? How do we drive change? But to just, and it's kind of a nuanced change, but to change it to commitments.
Yes.
Changing our verbiage to commitments. Commitments last. What commitments are we going to make? What commitments maybe we stop? What are the commitments that we're going to start? I really like that one a lot. Okay, so why aren't you going to associate leader standard work with lean? What's up with that? Tell me more.
Now, here's the thing. So some organizations are almost allergic to Kanban, Hijunka, lean. When you use the terminology, it's really dependent on your organization. So the organization that I'm in, we say continuous improvement. That's what we don't use the term lean. And one of the things is I see a lot of people come into organizations and try to push vernacular or certain kinds of things into the organization. Leader standard work is not about lean. Leader standard work is just a way to operate your day. So I like to disassociate the word from that. You can put it with it. That's perfectly fine. But I think if everything fell down today and nothing was sustained, if we sustain leader standard work, we would win. That's why. And that's where I see a lot of organizations struggle with lean. And I don't want to associate being an accountable leader, making commitments with lean if there's an organization that's on the fence about it. If you're struggling to get lean in your organization, then focus on standard work. Honestly, who can't get behind a commitment?
Right. And I think a lot of members are kind of in that same camp, starting to remove the lean vernacular and just talking about making improvements and creating that culture of continuous improvement, focusing on that. Who can't stand behind that?
Yep.
What about this? How do you convert the non-strategic to strategic leader standard work? Because there are lots of checkboxes out there. There's lots of templates that are not strategic like you're talking about. So if you were in a situation where you've got the checkbox for leader standard work and you want to convert that to the strategic standard work, you got any tips for us?
I think you go back to the journaling. The 3 days of journaling is super, super effective because, again, back to the screen that I shared about all the reasons why it fails is people turn it into like a pseudo check the box, artificial improvement process. Go journal. And what you're going to find is where are you spending your time and how does that fit into the organization? Because the checkbox, oh, we had a quality issue on line 2. Hey, let's check line 2 every other hour. Well, that's no, hang on a second. Why are we doing this? So it's kind of like the journaling is a fact check to see what are we really working on and what are we doing? Because what you'll find is some of those bottom things that have been on there for 4 or 5 months were a one-time event.
Yeah. So someone could maybe take their leader standard work that's just a bunch of check the box activities, and they could commit to adding one component that allows them to journal. So that way, I mean, if they've been checking these boxes for 5 years, maybe just add that one commitment to start journaling, start that practice.
And again, that's where the format, the reason why I'm married to this 6-panel format is only from the fact that I've modified it and worked on it. I've seen check the box for some people that really like that. That's great. I always look, how far can you spread that in the organization? Because that really doesn't work for everybody, but someone may be very, very effective at it. Not knocking that. What I look at is how deep can it go in the organization?
That point alone should help be able to make the shift from check the box to that format. That's a really good point. What about this? Have you had to engage executives in leader standard work, and how do you appropriately engage executives in leader standard work?
It's a tricky question for Friday at 5:30. So I will tell you right now.
Let's do it.
I will tell you right now, and this is pretty honest. A majority of the people that I report to have never been on leader standard work. And people would say, come on, Matt. Well, here's the deal, guys. Personally, I'm going to be accountable and I want to get good results. What happens above me is perfectly fine as long as I'm allowed, the free reign to do things. Because ultimately, I've had some people, and this is why I disassociate lean and standard work. I've had people that dislike standard work that I reported to and didn't care if I was on it or not. But leader standard work gets results. So I'm not worried about if the leadership team, but I've reported to people that absolutely do not believe in it. Here's what it goes back to, though. Commitments. At the end of the day, do they want results? Yes. It takes commitments to get results. So you can back end and kind of work your way back to it eventually with them on leader standard work. Hey, the best way to get someone to use a tool is prove that it works.
Right. Proof of concept. That'll drive action. We had one come in online, so I'm going to read this one. You mentioned not using electronic means for journaling, which we just talked about. Why don't you do it electronically? And then do you have recommendations on how possibly app-based to document leader standard work? You mentioned you're using a pen because of your food environment and paper, right?
Yep. Great question. And I'm glad someone asked that. So one organization I was with, our MDI boards were all pen and paper. So everything was handwritten. So we did all our leader standard work, pen and paper. Now, if your organization is making the transfer to all electronic, let's say it's a med device and everything's electronic, then you can do electronic standard work. The whole purpose of that was it was a teaching moment. If I'm trying to get someone to document things, I want them to get that muscle memory through journaling. And I would see how hard they would fight that. But you can do the same thing. Let's say like I carry an iPad with me and I take notes on here now too. If you guys are all electronic, then use the iPad or use the electronic as the same thing as pen and paper. It's okay. I just want to make sure that it's in line from the top all the way down through.
Got it. Yeah. So in line and easily accessible, right?
Yes.
Not every company is going to have the app. Not every team is going to have an iPad.
Yeah. And so one thing, you talk about accessibility, two things you can do. I used to have my teams turn the leader standard worksheet in every day. The reason why I did that, people talk about micromanagement. What I did with the leader standard work was I would make sure that my team was staying aligned with what they committed to. And it was also awesome for mid-year and year-end reviews. So I would pull those out and kind of go through them, and you can see trends and plans, what they've worked on. It's a really good way to write reviews at mid-year and year-end review.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, you had talked about delegating. So you said delegating, it's not deflecting, it's providing opportunities for others to lead. I've heard you say that before. I believe it and practice it. But do you have any tips for us on where to start if if you're just not accustomed to delegating?
Yes. So one thing I talk a lot about is engagement. And one of the things is getting to know people. So my team is spread out throughout the country. And one of their goals is they have to find 2 team members in each location to mentor. And when I first rolled that goal out, they said, "What? We're CI. Why are we mentoring people?" I said, because that's the first step to delegation is get to know your team. Who are the players that are up and comers that are really wanting to grow and develop? When you identify those team members, latch onto them and start developing them. So get to know your team, get to know who the high performers are, and they do not have to be in a leadership role. That's one thing everybody talks about. How do we develop our leaders? Well, you can develop leaders, but I've seen hourly team members that are awesome leaders that I will delegate. Hey, go to the MDI meeting for me. What? You're the plant manager. That's fine. I trust Jody. She's really good. I want her to get experience. Hey, go and take notes for me. Jody's an up and comer. She's going to do really well. You're empowering the people that want to be empowered. The delegation mind flip for me took a lot of years because there's a stigma about delegation. It's everywhere. I hear it all the time. It's not a bad thing. You need to delegate to empower other people.
Yeah. You mentioned high pose, and then, delegating to those people that want it. Usually high potentials are inquisitive. They're asking questions.
Yeah.
They're seeking information. They want the data. They want your perspective. So I think a lot of people know that. How else to identify a high potential?
Oh, it's being on the floor. So if you look back at the standard work, it's interacting with the team. So there's a 5-question rule that I generally go around with about, asking the name, how long they've been there, what do they really like, what do they dislike, and really get to know where they worked before. When you ask those 5 questions, you can identify a high pot that's not necessarily a high pot. And what I mean by that is by the last question, where did you work before? Well, hey, my name's Matt Kanz, and I worked at Cargill, and I helped design and build a plant. But now I'm doing director of continuous improvement. Oh, hey, we're looking at building a plant. Oh my gosh. All right. Come to this meeting. We want your input on this. Well, if no one asks questions, that's the key to it, is go ask people questions. Those 5 questions are really critical. You can go find high pots. They're not always out there right away because they may not know there are opportunities. But please, anybody that's still left on, don't be afraid to delegate, because it's kind of cool because people feel like they're involved. That's the whole point of delegation. It's not about just empowerment, it's involvement.
So I've got one more question, Matt, and I'm actually gonna do something different, something we've never done before. We have had an amazing session. I could go until 11:59 tonight until we get shut down and we're forced to go home, but we're not gonna do that. This recording is gonna stop in a few moments, and then we're gonna carry the conversation online. So for those of you that are listening, you could join us on social media on, I'll say LinkedIn through the Manufacturers Alliance, where I'm gonna ask Matt to answer this last question. So Matt, don't answer it, but here's the question. How do you best communicate to your team where they fit and why they matter? Because that is one of the key things that you pulled out of those conversations, those coaching conversations from your leader standard work, and as a part of your commitments and acting on your leader standard work. And I think that's a key one. So again, the question will be, how do you best communicate to your team where they fit and why they matter? So we're going to take the answer to that with Matt Kanz off of this webinar and online. So join us in the Manufacturers Alliance LinkedIn group, and you'll see the answer there. And then last but not least, we're going to send out a webinar survey. So I'm going to send the link right now. Okay, one of you got it. Now, the rest of you just got it. And so if you would take a moment, fill that out, send it into our team as we're working remotely. That's a SurveyMonkey survey. And while you're doing that, know that our Six Sigma Green Belt Lean Practitioner, as well as our Supervision Fundamental certifications, are available online. We've also got a brand new podcast we're starting on Monday. We interviewed former manufacturing CEO and executive turned author and consultant Rob Tracy on how to be able to respond to not only COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place order, but really any catastrophic or business interruption. So he's got these 5 points on how to respond to those dire situations. And then also last but not least, I want to tell you about next Friday. Matt Kanz is going to continue this conversation, continue the coaching and the learning, as we're going to come at you again with a webinar on sustaining change. And so that's April 3rd. And so join us April 3rd. If you haven't registered yet, go ahead and register soon. We will definitely see you online. So with that, Matt, we're all done. I will see you on LinkedIn as we talk about that last question. Thank you very much, Matt.
Hey, thank you.
All right, take care, everybody. Matt, you got an extra second?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
That was fun.
Hey, good. Hey, sorry it went a little long, but I hope it was worth it.
It's all good. It was. I was right at our normal time, 5:10. I was like, well, should I just turn my camera on? And I thought, no, I'm still taking notes. I'm sure others are too. Let's just keep rolling.
Sorry about that. Hey, I love these subjects, so I get excited about them. I can't stop.
Yeah, we did have a few questions from people come in, and then 4 from the pre-event survey, and then I had 3. So we could have done those for a little bit longer on the formal recording, but it's all good. Hey, I just wanted to say that you are on a roll. Your presentation